Your first class meeting will be a face-to-face session with Professor Harper on Saturday. There is nothing you need to do to prepare for that class. Just bring yourself, a pen or pencil, and a notebook or some paper to write on. That's all. However, because in this class we don't have as much time as we normally do, we have fewer weeks in this class than normal, and we have a lot of material to cover. So right now I want to explain to you the homework that will be due before our first Zoom session on Monday. I'm explaining this homework to you now so you can get started on it early and have more time to work on it. There are 4 things that I want you to do to prepare for our first class meeting on Monday. Let me talk first about the first 2 things, which are fun things. These are the things that I think that you'll probably find most enjoyable. The first thing that I'd like you to do is I would like you to read a chapter from a book. This book is called Rivertown. It's written by the author Peter Hessler, who is one of the most famous journalists in the English-speaking world to write about China. And this book is about his experience living in a city called Fuling in Sichuan during the early 1990s. The chapter from this book that I would like you to read is called Running. And this chapter describes the time when Peter Hessler first arrived in Fuling and he's trying to learn Chinese. It's a story of his struggles to learn the Chinese language, the difficulties he encountered, and how he overcame those difficulties and ultimately became, we know from reading the rest of this book, that he becomes a fluent Chinese speaker. I think you'll enjoy reading this because what's interesting about it is that you get to see the experience of somebody learning your own native language as a foreign language. This piece of writing, it's a story, right? It's vivid, it's interesting, it has lots of scenes and characters in it. However, it is quite long, right? So do your best to read it. If there are some places where you don't get everything, don't worry, right? Just read for the main story. Try to generally understand what happened to Peter Hessler during this period of time he describes. And as you read, I'd like you to, in particular, be thinking about this question. What motivates Peter Hessler as he is learning Chinese, right? What is motivating him? What is the force that's pushing him forward as he is doing this very difficult process, right, of learning a foreign language that he's had no exposure to? That's very different from his own. What is motivating him as he is doing that? What's pushing him forward? But also, as you're reading, be thinking about what is demotivating? What is decreasing his motivation or pushing back against him as he is struggling to learn Chinese, right? So as you're reading, be thinking about those 2 questions. What motivates Peter Hessler and what demotivates him? Now, after you're done reading this chapter, I would like you to do your first writing assignment for this class. And here's what it is. I would like you to write, for me, the story of how you learned English, right? You just read the story of how Peter Hessler learned Chinese, or at least a part of that story. Now, I would like you to tell me your story. You could tell it from the beginning all the way up to the present, or if you want, you could do what Peter Hessler does, which is to choose a significant period of time during your study of English and just narrate that period of time. When you're sitting down to write this story, you might want to think about what were some of the most significant moments in my study of English? What were the greatest challenges that I faced? How did I overcome those challenges? Where did my motivation come from, right? What motivated me? What demotivated me as I studied English? What were some of the significant places or people who were involved in your learning of English? These are just some questions to get you thinking as you sit down to tell your own English language learning story. I'm imagining something at least 800 words long in English. But it could be longer if you want. There's no limit in about how much you can write. And this assignment will not be graded, right? I'm not going to give you a grade on this assignment. As long as you do it and take it seriously, you'll get full credit for it. The goal of this assignment is simply, it's a way for you to introduce yourself to me. It's a way for me to get to know you as an English learner and sort of get inside your head. And keep in mind that if you want to get me inside your head, remember, write vividly, right? Paint a picture in my mind. In this respect, you can take inspiration from Peter Hessler, who's very good at doing that. Okay, what I've just described is not an insignificant amount of work, but I'm hoping that it should be fun, right? This is an opportunity to read something interesting in English and to express yourself freely. The second two things that I'd like you to do are a little more practical. So here's what they are. I would like you to read the very beginning of our textbook for this class. This book is the most common academic writing handbook in the United States. Practically every university freshman is learning writing out of this book, right? What I'd like you to read in this book is simply a few pages of the introduction of the book. And I'm going to explain now exactly what I want you to read in the introduction. So, read this, read this. Keep reading, read this, read that. When you get to here, how it's done, stop right there. When you get to this point, you've already read all of the important points that the author wants to convey in this chapter. Everything that comes afterward is just going to be him repeating and explaining those same things in different ways, right? So once you get here, stop. And then for the rest of the chapter, just sort of skim, right? Go quickly, right? Just sort of see what is in the chapter, but don't read it carefully, right? So skim through this, quickly, 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 skim through this. Okay, now, once you get here, putting in your oar, now I'd like you to read this bit carefully as well, from here to the end of the chapter and stop, right? So really you're only reading 4 or 5 pages total. Please come to our first Zoom session, having read those 4 or 5 pages and having chosen one sentence in those pages that you think is particularly important, and be ready to share that sentence with us. And lastly, here is the final thing that I would like you to do. On your Sakai, you'll also find this document. What you're seeing on this document is examples of prompts, right? So the instructions for writing assignments that a number of other professors have given at DKU and also at other universities before they came to teach at DKU. These are instructions for a kind of writing assignment that you're likely to come across a lot in your other classes, which your teachers will sometimes call maybe a response essay or a reading response or something like that. And usually what it is it's a short piece of writing, maybe a couple paragraphs long, that your professor asks you to write after having read something and in preparation for coming to a class. What I'd like you to go down is look at each of these prompts. Here's one, here's another, right? All right, here's another, right? And then here we have a bunch of short little prompts, each of them for a separate short writing assignment. Go through these writing assignment instructions, read them, and I'd like you to think about the question, what do these writing assignments have in common? And also, what is the connection between these writing assignments and what the authors of They Say, I Say are saying in the introduction that I'm having you read? So I'd like you to come to class having looked over those examples of instructions for short writing assignments and be ready to share with us your answer to the question, what do they have in common? Okay, that's all I have to say to you today. Looking forward to seeing you all on Monday. And remember, if you have any questions about anything I've just said, don't hesitate to contact me on WeChat and ask me.